Welcome, everyone, to Nerd of the Rings. Today, we have a very special guest, Mr. Bear McCreary. You know him as the composer of the Rings of Power. Bear, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on. It's going to be fun.
Now, Bear, before we get really into the meat of the interview, I was working last night researching really hard for this interview, and this guy showed up, and I happen to get it on video, so I'll just show you the video of this guy.
Well, if you're planning on killing me, at least let me finish this song. That alarm was in just the perfect key.
We're just looking for a friend of ours named Durlin.
Well, we both know that's not true. Durlin's got no friends left. But if that's all you need, head out the back way there, and you'll see the safety office just across the river.
Yeah.
He sounded a bit familiar.
It's funny. On interviews for Rings of Power, people have said, if you were any race from the Lord of the Rings, what would you be? And I'm always like, I'm a dwarf. In heart, I'm a dwarf. And I think the team at Santa Monica Studio felt the same way when they wrote this character, Rabe, who's on the main quest of God of War Ragnarok. And yeah, there he is. That's me playing the hurdy-gurdy, which I actually play. So look, guys, I'm not going to lie. I might quit the day job here. There you go. And pursue my career as an actor only playing dwarves. I think that's the corner of the market.
Yeah.
So if I retire from film music, you guys heard it here first.
We know why. Yeah. Well, now I'm sure, now that they've seen Rabe, there's got to be a cameo coming for you in one of the upcoming seasons of Rings of Power, I imagine.
We'll see, man. We'll see. And, I think a whole side story, a spin-off series maybe about a dwarven musician. I mean, really, I want to corner the market for dwarves who play hurdy-gurdy. Like, I think that the Rings of Powers would benefit from that.
Yes. Definitely. Yeah. We got to see there's an origin shot there somewhere in that epic, amazing opening shot of Khazad-dum.
Yeah.
We got to zoom in tight on a guy sitting in a corner.
And then maybe season 3 is just all
him.
That guy. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you know what? I'll mention it to the showrunners next time I talk to them.
Well, I wanted to say congrats on the release of God of War Ragnarok. In all joking aside, I've been playing that, and it's a phenomenal game. And the music is just absolutely top notch. And it was actually when you were announced as the composer for Rings of Power, I immediately went into the mode of like, okay, who's this guy? I got to go check this guy out. God of War, the previous game was where I went. And as soon as I heard that very first track, I was like, oh my God, I can't wait for khazad-dum.
Yeah. The khazad-dum track and its relationship to some of the sounds I use in God of War, all of which come from Basil Polidorus. I mean, I didn't invent this. It's a huge love letter to the kind of music that Basil wrote, and he's not here to score Rings of Power, so I gotta imagine what it would be like, to have him write something like that. But yeah, man, I appreciate that. I mean, God of War, originally the 2018 game was an incredible opportunity for musical storytelling, for fantasy storytelling, and I thought, oh my God, I'm never going to get to do a fantasy thing again. So I got to put it all into this, and then it ended up. I had to top it somehow or attempt to for Ragnarok. And I'm really proud of it. I mean, I think it's a fantasy score. I mean, look, I should be sitting here in an interview saying God of War Ragnarok is the best fantasy score that I put out this year. It's got all these amazing themes, cool languages, awesome soloists, and it's emotional and it's got a cool collaboration with a brilliant pop artist. And it's like, it is one of two things that I did this year that I can say that about. So that's shocking to me. I'm very just grateful and proud of both scores, and I think they both stand on their own.
Absolutely.
God of War and Rings of Power. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely some overlap there too. So anybody that's here because they love Lord of the Rings, check out the game God of War and God of War Ragnarok, and the music, is, I imagine, is been fuel. Imagine the score has been fueling D&D nights around the world for a while now.
Now, I asked some of my viewers for questions they had for you, and I thought this segues nicely, given the talking about these two different franchises you've scored for. How does your approach? This question comes from a little Tukish. How does your approach to a series like Rings of Power differ from your approach to a game like God of War?
Fundamentally, the approach is very similar. I approach all these projects through themes. I write themes first, and then I get into the business of what my job actually is. In the case of Rings of Power, my job is scoring scenes. So I'm applying the themes that I wrote to the scenes and creating a broader structure across the episode, the season, the series. I'm doing all of that in God of War and God of War Ragnarok because there's a couple hours worth of narrative.
Yeah.
But I'm also then applying those themes into adaptive music that's integrated into gameplay. There's some technical differences, but at the end of the day, I had to write a theme for every primary character in God of War Ragnarok, and that was building upon the themes that I wrote for God of War 2018. So at the end of the day, I had to write a theme that you connected with this father, this absent father, and Faye, this woman who we never see really, his deceased wife, the Atreus's mother. And those are the two primary themes, along with some other fun supporting ones in the first game. And in this game, God of War Ragnarok, Atreus is older, and I had to write him a theme. And there's a theme for Odin and Thor. There are these great dwarven characters. No, not the one I played. The other two. That they got a theme. So it was sort of like I added more themes into the mix. There's some comparison there. But I mean, really, nothing for me compares to the task I had in starting Rings of Power. I think at the end of the day, the number of themes that exist in my score for the entire God of War saga, there's, I don't know, 6 major ones, and I had to write 17 for the first season of Rings of Power, and there's more coming. So it is on a different scale, and I think that's because of the intimacy of the God of War story, especially 2018. It's about a journey of a father and son. That's it. It's about them. And Rings of Power is obviously has more characters out of the gate.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm curious, how did you find out that you got the job, that you got the gig of composing Rings of Power?
How did I find out? I was speaking with the showrunners before the pandemic, long before the pandemic, actually. I think I was even, if I recall, we were even checking into tickets to New Zealand because I was like, I'll come out and meet. We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
And then everything went radio silent when the pandemic hit, because obviously I think they had a lot to worry about, and suddenly the person who would be scoring cuts of the episodes that didn't even exist at that time was not their top priority.
Yeah.
And then so it was actually a year and a half, 2 years later, that showrunner Lindsay Weber, who I've worked with on a couple of Bad Robot projects, 10 Cloverfield Lane, notably, reached back out and started up that conversation. But actually, I think I found out that I was hired. Yes, I remember. All right, so speaking of fantasy scores, right? Every time I do a fantasy thing, I never think I'm going to do one again. So I did God of War, and then I thought, oh my God, I finally get to do one fantasy score. Then I got to do God of War Ragnarok, which the vast majority of that score I wrote years ago. Did not write it recently because games take a long time.
Yeah.
Then I got hired on a fantasy show called Masters of the Universe Revelation, and it was for Kevin Smith, and again kind of thinking about Basil Polidorus and his score for Conan the Barbarian, but I got to throw in some heavy metal stuff. I thought, wow, this is it. A fantasy television show with orchestra. Here we go. And truly, on the day that I finished that, Kevin came over to my house and I turned my phone off. We shot a quick little video. You can find it online. We were even singing stupid lyrics to my character themes. But Lord of the Rings fans should check it out. I mean, it was the total warm-up. It might surprise you. It was the total warm-up for Rings of Power, because I think out of the gate on that, I wrote 14 themes. They weren't as developed.
Wow.
But in the first episode, we just dropped into a battle and we have all these characters, and I had to write good guy themes, bad guy themes, emotional, and I thought, oh my God, all right, I'm going to do this. This is what a fantasy show needs. And the last day, Kevin came over, we shot a little video talking about it that we released, and then he left, and I turned my phone back on, and I had a voicemail from Lindsay Weber. So that was it. And it was literally like the instant I finished Masters of the Universe, and no joke, Masters of the Universe Revelation completely obliterated me. I mean, those 10 episodes, if you go back and listen, they're massive. And I worked on them for 7 consecutive months.
Wow.
And so in a way, when I talk about, I don't usually talk about this. Here we are talking about He-Man, but I think you guys appreciate this, that it was like running a marathon. It was like I'd already run the first half. Because then when I got that call, I was like, I've got to do this again on Lord of the Rings, for what ends up being twice as much storytelling,
Yeah.
But in a way, it was Masters of the Universe that I was already running full speed. So I took a week off, went back to visit my folks in Washington State, and came back and was like, all right, here we go, Lord of the Rings.
Back to the grind.
Yeah.
Another question here. This is from Rigatoni. Wants to know, how do you distinguish between fantasy worlds? So how do you find the unique sound of Middle Earth versus The Witcher, God of War, Outlander, and how do you keep them? I'm very curious about this. How do you keep them from blending together in your mind?
It's tricky. I have to put a lot of effort into. Am I wrong? Do I not put effort into that? I don't put effort into that, but I put effort into something else that affects that. Every time I take on a project, I try to find something that has a lot of character, something that's really distinct. And in a way, I kind of inhabit that fantasy world, and I bring on people that collaborators, musicians, that make that happen. And for example, in The Witcher Blood Origin, this 4-part kind of epic movie that I scored, that's coming out in a few weeks.
Yeah.
I brought in some really distinct musicians, including this singer Morgan Sorn, who can do these Tuvan distorted vocals, like he's incredible, and he can do these ethereal. He sounds like a soprano. He's incredible. And I brought him in. We were just jamming, and I recorded a bunch of tracks. I brought in other musicians to work with him. We improvised a lot of stuff. That's completely distinct. The Witcher sounds nothing like Lord of the Rings. And there's no orchestra in The Witcher. None. It's kind of it's more like Black Sails than anything else.
Yeah. So
once I get into those musical enclaves, I'm pretty safe to explore. I will say that the and even Masters of the Universe has this heavy metal band in it. But if you muted the heavy metal band, it would be a lot like Lord of the Rings. Actually, I'm almost tempted to release the album with the band muted, and you'd be like, oh my God, it is so conceptually similar, but it's not in the end, because the band, the double kick drums and the guitars, it take it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And God of War and Lord of the Rings were the toughest. And especially because I had to develop a very specific language for the dwarves in God of War. And in particular, in Ragnarok, I wrote this new theme that has this kind of swagger. it's cool. And I was like, oh my God, like, how is this not going to get into my brain? And in that, I don't know, Duran's theme, bum, 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 ba-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum, bum, bum, bum. It's not like 1,000% different, but it is ultimately like khazad-dum is not like the Svartalfheim from Ragnarok. And in fact, it's like, but the colors are kind of similar. So I don't know. That one, it is tricky, but I basically set my parameters. Like I go, this is the playground I'm going to play on. And now I'm just going to run wild, knowing that if I'm in this area, it'll be okay. It'll be its own thing.
Very cool. Now I usually ask folks this first, but I wanted to circle back. So I'm curious, how were you first introduced to Tolkien and Middle Earth?
It's probably first introduced with the Rankin Bass Hobbit.
Yeah.
As a kid. And then I read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings in like middle school, high school. I really liked it. But the animated movies that I kept sort of seeking out, they were a little dated. Mm-hmm. And you got, I was born in 1979. So while I'm watching those things, it's like, boom, Back to the Future, boom, Jurassic Park. You know what I mean? Like, just boom, all these Star Trek 2, Star Trek 4, Star Trek 6. It's just like one after the other. And I'm a visual, aural, sonic, musical mind.
Yeah.
The Tolkien stuff got lost. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. It's like, it could not compete because I'm just like these fantasy worlds on screeners blowing my mind. And the adaptations for Tolkien were simply not.
Yeah.
So then I rediscovered it when the Peter Jackson films came out. Those movies had a huge impact on me. And then I went back and I was almost like I had this feeling like, well, I must have missed something. You know what I mean? And when those movies came out, I was a huge and remain, but before the movies came out, I was a massive fan of Peter Jackson. And in fact, I was just, if anything, it was Peter Jackson doing those books. I was like, oh, even before the movies came out, I was like, that guy is making those books. Like, I gotta go there must be something there that I, like in my childhood, fever dreams of all the books and movies I was consuming, I must have missed. So then I went back and like a lot of people, the movies were like this gateway back into the world. I'm grateful for that, and it was not only an entry into the fictional world, but when those movies came out, I had just graduated college. I was in my last year of college when the first one came out. And it was also like a really clear professional ambition. I mean, it was almost like the movies were coming out at the very end of my childhood and the beginning of my professional career. I was already a protege of Elmer Bernstein at the time, one of the great film composers of all time. I'd just been doing student films, dozens and dozens of them. And I was looking for people. I moved to LA looking for people like me, obsessive weirdos who love telling stories. And then I saw those appendices on the DVDs and I watched those as often as I watched the movies. And I thought, oh my God, there are people out there like me, and you can assemble them on one thing. And then, so in a way, it's like the Lord of the Rings movies were more than just like a fantasy world that I thought was cool. Mm-hmm. They were different than Star Wars and all that other stuff that I grew up with, Star Trek, because not only was it a fantasy world, but it really was the first time that I clocked beyond just wanting to write music that you need to find your people, and I, dared to daydream that I would work on a project one day that had people like that, making it. It could be one of them. I mean, and that, so anyway, that, Lord of the Rings is very special to me and always has been on sort of two different levels.
Yeah. Now, and I'm sure, seeing the craftsmanship behind it, like you said, finding your people and seeing the craftsmanship that went into that. And obviously the score was a big, beloved part of those films, obviously, that Howard Shore did. So was there any feeling of, what, I guess the natural reaction that most people would have is, holy crap, I have to follow Howard Shore's Lord of the Rings, as you get put onto this project. So what did that thought ever go through your mind?
Not really.
Yeah.
A few thoughts went through my mind. It went through my mind in that I loved his scores, and I love his scores still. But following them or wondering what other people would think about what I did. I can truthfully say that never crossed my mind, because there was something else that terrified me even more. It's like saying, like, are you worried about, tripping down the stairs when your house is on fire? Like, the thing that scared me more than anything else was, can I write a score that I would be proud of?
Mm.
It's like every single project I come into, I bring my full passion and energy.
Yeah.
Of which I have a lot of. And sometimes it goes great. Other times it doesn't. Like, people don't always want my full energy and my full range of ideas. And I often have to go, okay, I'll back off. Let's just write like a score that will sit where you want it to. I'm here to please. I'm here to do a job. But I knew what I wanted Lord of the Rings to sound like. And there were all these barriers now, hurdles. Will I be able to even, like, write music that I think, like, yeah, that, like, I'm proud of that. I'd stand by that. There's nobody, it's just me in this studio.
Yeah.
And I'm ruthless on my self-criticism. You know what I mean? Like, I was more worried about that than what anybody else thought. And then, even if I could, Matt, would they let me put it in the show?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? I could write.
Yeah.
And this happens all the time, where some compromised version of my vision is what you experience. So a lot of times, when fans will, complain about something, they're like, why did you whatever? And of course, what I want to say is, like, I know. What do you like, it's not, I'm filling in a job here. And sometimes you just got to do what they want.
Right.
So there were a lot of questions, but at the end of the day, I just reverted back to the way I felt when I saw those movies and went back and reread the books. Like, I just got up every morning and thought, okay, like, I want to go to khazad-dum. So how can I get there? And I would not be served at all by thinking, while I'm sitting here and I'm playing the piano and I'm imagining these worlds, to go, let's check in. How does this compare to Howard Shore?
Right.
I would literally quit. I would, what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't help you.
It'd be prohibitive. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Self-censorship is the worst thing an artist can have. And you have to learn these tricks to get these voices out of your head. There was also another interesting thing, which made it much easier, is that I knew that eventually, during the process, Howard was going to come in and write our main title sequence.
Right.
There was a box that was going to be checked that I didn't need to check.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I spoke with Howard a few times. He was supportive, and that was incredible. So I just kind of felt like, Howard is going to bring the Howard. Mm-hmm. And I can't impersonate someone's writing. I mean, I've mentioned, like, Basil Polidorus and James Horner, and there's a lot of, like, Bernard Herrmann and Jerry Goldsmith. But at the end of the day, it's all running through my filter. I can't actually make you think somebody other than me wrote what you're hearing. So again, to even attempt to do that would be creative death. So I just thought, you know what? I'm going to just write the score that I want. And if I can come up with these themes and listen to them and think, yeah, that's what I, as a fan, want to hear when I walk into khazad-dum. And I just thought, like, I'm going to put that out in the universe and see what happens. And that, as rare as it is, that is what happened. The producers let me put the thing that I wanted in the show. And there it is.
That's awesome. And that's one of my, I actually remember messaging you shortly after the premiere and, or after, I guess it was after the soundtrack dropped, and Numenor and khazad-dum were the two that I think, episode 3 is where we get Numenor, and those two, khazad-dum and Numenor, back to back in episodes 2 and 3. I was like, yes, this is, as they say, inject this into my veins. That's the way those were.
Those two, I love hearing you say that. And there's a reason too. Like, those two themes represent the might and height of those two cultures, those two races that we cannot get in the Third Age.
Yes.
I mean, for obvious reasons, that it's like impossible. If anything, when you go back and, you revisit the movies, you look at, like, where are the places that Howard got to display might and power, and it's Barad-dûr.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kind of, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That is the society that is, like, powerful and at its peak and sending its influence out into the world, and everybody else is on the ropes.
Yeah.
Not here, not in the Second Age, especially at the beginning of our story. So that was to answer the question, that I've answered before and you haven't asked yet. But I mean, that really was the greatest connection with Howard's work in the films, is I'm like teeing up things that don't sound like what he did, but sound like my plan is they will evolve or devolve into something that hands off into what he did. Because these really are these cultures, most of them are at the opposite end of their lifespan.
Right.
As they were in those movies. So
as I've often told people, it's really the Lord of the Rings is kind of a post-apocalyptic tale for many of these cultures. The men, they are the remnants of Numenor, and the dwarves are displaced. They're not at their height.
I agree. And the other thing to remember is time. Look, disclaimer, cards on the table. I am not legally allowed to use any of the themes from the movie, so I can't. Yeah. But let's do a thought experiment and pretend I could. And if I could, there are a few I might have used. But if I could, would you have wanted to hear the Gondor theme as we come into Numenor? What would that mean? It's like that melody has survived thousands of years. Like, the distance in time between what we see in the Lord of the Rings and what we're seeing in the Rings of Power is the same between, like, being in New York City and being in, like, ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
It's so different. It is on our time scales, incredible.
Yeah.
And the idea that, like, musical cultures evolve and change, not to mention that, like, the Numenor will fracture. Gondor is just one sort of arm of it that survives. What would it say about the other people of Numenor if, like, we come into Numenor, not to mention, like, you have the faithful versus their opposite. Yeah. Exactly. So it's like Numenor needed its own identity.
Yeah.
It really did. Narratively, it needed its own identity. And so in a way, like, I took the blessing in disguise, that we have to reinvent the wheel. We have to create something that will lead into the movies as seamlessly as possible. But I mean, even when, you know, composers have those rights, you know, you look at one of my favorite scores that John Williams ever wrote is The Phantom Menace.
Right.
And it's like Duel of the Fates.
Duel of the Fates, yeah.
Duel of the Fates. And you can probably guess which track on my record I was thinking about Duel of the Fates when I wrote. But it's like, that's great that Williams gave us that, you know? So I think that, like, ultimately, my job is in the best case scenario still continuation, not quotation. And as it would turn out, quotation is beyond impossible anyway. So I might as well embrace that philosophy and get the fullest effect out of it.
Absolutely. Now, I've seen in other interviews you talk about specific themes, and you mentioned that Elrond is the one that you struggled with the most.
Yeah.
And he's actually probably, well, Durin is really up there too, but I really enjoy Robert's portrayal. He was one of the ones, as Elrond is my favorite Second Age character, I was a little nervous going in because I had such high hopes for him, and I really think they did a great job with Elrond. So tell us a bit about, you know, what is it about the Elrond theme that was a challenge for you?
My love of Peter Jackson's films made it a challenge. There are times when that was not helpful to me. And it's like, you know, like screen burn on a TV.
Yeah.
You stare at the sun. Hugo Weaving's Elrond is that for me. And he's very distinct. He's in the movies. He's an authority figure. He holds all his emotions close to the chest, except for like this gravitas. I mean, it's like, you know, even his emotional revelation in the structure of the movies that Peter created to reform Narsil happened off camera. We didn't even see him do it. It's like we cut away and then it's happening. So it's like, he's reserved, he's distant, he's, you know, and that messed me up because it's like the Second Age Elrond is not that. Indeed, even the Elrond in The Hobbit. I went back and reread The Hobbit, and in particular just that chapter. In the beginning of The Hobbit, and I was like, right, like this guy. There's we're going to get to him. I mean, I love Hugo Weaving's portrayal, but we are on our way there, and starting. And
even there's a warmth to him that you don't really get in the Lord of the Rings, especially. There's a couple moments in The Hobbit where we kind of get that he like jokes around a little bit, but there's a warmth to that character that we don't really get in the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, and in the Peter Jackson films that I adore, you know, there are a few characters that got shaved down because cinema, not television, cinema requires some supporting players to have very specific arcs and functions. You see this all over the place. I mean, what do we know about Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back? We know some basic stuff.
Yeah.
That's it. And he might even be a layered example. But I mean, there are a couple of characters, you know, notably Elrond, Galadriel, obviously.
Isildur is
the big one, man.
Yeah.
I think of all the characters he got in the films, shaved down the most.
Yeah.
To something that had to represent the weakness of humans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We needed that in the story, but it also just kind of sucks for that character.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, but I bring all that up because these are the things that the showrunners brought up with me. I worked for 6 weeks crafting themes. I did not play them for the showrunners. I did not tip the scale for them and say, oh, here's the Galadriel theme. Here's the Elrond theme. The first time they ever heard my ideas for what those themes are in a broader symphonic context is when the record came out. They didn't hear it.
Wow.
And the reason they didn't hear it is I wanted them to have the objectivity you have. So when I would presenting my first sketches, after 6 weeks, I just disappeared. They didn't see me or hear from me. And part of that was me testing to see if they could pull that off, to see what sort of, if they really trusted me, they would let me disappear.
Yeah.
They did. They even in the opening teaser in Valinor, they're like, oh, after the cue played, they're like, oh, I love the Galadriel theme when she's a little girl, and I think that's the Sauron theme when we get a little hint. That's cool. And then we introduce we get through Farthwaite, and then we get to the Harfoots. We get to Elrond, and we Linden and all that stuff, and they go, yeah, that's cool. So does Elrond have a theme? Is that an Elrond theme? And I thought, all right, well, let me stop you there. If I have to go to the piano and go, no, listen, it's this, then it's not doing its job.
Right.
So they really encouraged me to go back to the books, to think about the broader family relationships that this guy has. I mean, like, which would come up later in episodes that I had read, but I hadn't seen cuts yet, where he talks about his dad.
Mm-hmm.
We find out about his brother, and of course, going back to the lore and the legendarium and the books, you realize, like, man, that's got to be tough.
Yeah,
for him. And that, I went back and looked at his scenes, and I go, here's a guy that like remains ever optimistic, and he's buying in, and he trusts Gil-galad. He wrote this speech for him. He wants Galadriel to take the reward and just go. Like, he's very much in the system. And I thought, this is a guy who's very idealistic and optimistic and strong. And then I wrote this new theme, which is the one you hear, which itself has this little turn, da 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 da, happy, da 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 da, minor. So it just kind of goes like, whoosh,
da
da da da da da da, sad, da 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 da, optimistic. It's just like it's kind of weaving around and giving him some depth. But he was tricky. And it was like almost like I had to separate out the movies and kind of go like, put that away. We'll get there. We're gonna work our way over to that.
But that's. I mean, I love hearing it described like that, because, as like I said, Elrond is one of my big favorite characters because of diving into the lore deeper. You realize how much of his life is this mixture of happy and sad, to where Third Age Elrond has to, he knows if everything turns out great, he's going to lose his daughter forever. And like, there's just that mixture.
When you watch those movies, and especially because Arwen is moved more to the front, which is awesome. Liv Tyler's great. Mm-hmm. You just feel like, oh man, he really loves his daughter. Like, that's, most audiences are just like, of course, he doesn't want to lose his daughter. But I mean, this is where, Rings of Power is going to introduce people to Lord of the Rings. It's an uncontroversial statement. It's going to happen. There are people watching our show that haven't watched these movies from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
When they watch Rings of Power and then go watch the movies, to me, it's even more emotional when you're like, it's not just losing his daughter. Yeah. He has lost, talk about pulling the short straw, that you're an elf and you get to live forever and it's great. And then it's like your dad and your brother, and your mother. And it's like he lost everybody.
Yeah.
So for him, especially in the Hugo Weaving portrayal, it's like, not Arwen 2. I can't.
Yeah.
I've lost too much. That's all in the subtext of the films. Mm-hmm. But the show has the possibility to augment that experience and make those movies even better for people. I love that. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I love the ability to like bring people into the movies, make the movies better, which only ultimately brings people back to the books, where they can get all the layers.
Absolutely. Now, I'm really curious. I wanted to make sure to ask, looking ahead to potential, future in future seasons of Rings of Power, we know there's some big key moments, that Tolkien wrote about. What are some things that you look at throughout Tolkien's Second Age and think, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to score this scene or this moment?
I mean, there's so many that it almost boggles the mind when you watch that. I remember the first time I saw Fellowship of the Ring, and like Galadriel does this 7 or 10 minute prologue, and you're just like, wait, well, what? Wait, what? Like expanding all that out. For me, I think the thing I'm most looking forward to is Celebrimbor. And I love Charles Edwards' performance. And look, man, I played the hell out of those Mordor games. I get it. I love them. But to me, Celebrimbor is hubris personified.
Absolutely.
And this portrayal of him, you even see it in the last episode. I love all those little moments, where because he's a manipulator. He's manipulating Elrond from the beginning. And then we find out maybe he feels bad about it. But at the end of the day, like
maybe he doesn't. Yeah.
Maybe he doesn't. He's ambitious. It's almost a better read that he doesn't feel bad about it.
Yeah.
All he cares about is like, I want to build this thing. I want the glory. I mean, he straight up says it, like, I want something more. Seeing the rug pulled out from under that guy.
Yeah.
Is a really exciting prospect because we like him. He's good at what he does. That there's just that sort of, how the mighty have fallen story. I mean, that's something that I've always thought, like, God, what was it like to be that guy? You know what I mean? Like, to be able to see that, or another moment, you just want to imagine, like, when the One Ring is forged and Sauron puts it on for the first time, and the entire world changes and everybody has their reaction, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I want to see, it's like that. I guess it's really like, at the end of the day, this is such a fantastic tale of betrayal that is elided over to get to the good stuff in the Lord of the Rings. Like, I'm really looking forward to all of that, seeing that dramatized.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the ones that came to my mind as you were talking there is so after the fall of Numenor, when Elendil comes to the shores of Middle Earth, and I don't know, this probably won't be happening for a while, but we know that in the Lord of the Rings, Viggo sings his coronation song, which is the same words that Elendil says when he comes to the shores of Middle Earth after the fall of Numenor. And I've already seen fans, we've had all kinds of discussions in my Discord of saying, like, oh my God, could you imagine Lloyd Owen's voice singing the same song?
There's a lot of fun stuff ahead. And I will say that, like, I have been pouring through the source material, in particular the source material we have access to.
Yeah.
I want to bring more text in. I mean, I started with, almost to get it over with, the most obvious one. Like, the minute I got hired, I was like, we got to set the ring verse. Like, the most famous poem. I can say that, right? It is. Yeah. The most famous poem. I'm always careful with, like, declarative statements, but for the world, yeah. So anyway, but it's like, let's set it, and let's set it now. I don't want to save it for season 5 or whatever. Like, let's do it in season 1, as a prelude.
Yeah.
Or for completely oblivious newcomer fans, like, as a spoiler. I don't care. There, you know what I mean? Because then I can dig deeper and find songs and texts that are like the ones you're describing. And, I know that I speak for the showrunners when we are all very excited about that. And for my part, like, I definitely intend to see what we can do to bring in more stuff like that adds, nuance and connection.
Now I'm curious, and obviously, I know you can't say any spoilers or anything, but just given the breadcrumbs that we've gotten from the finale, we know that the stranger He's a wizard, and he is heading to Rune. And this is a land that we've never seen adapted in Middle Earth. So, you talk about leading into the movies. So this, presuming that we will eventually see Rune, this could be the opportunity to make something entirely new, kind of like Numenor. But even then, you said, you're kind of still, have the Gondor stuff kind of in mind a little bit.
Yeah.
So have you already, season 1's just ended. Are you already, in the back of your mind, wheels turning about what Rune might be like and what influences you might use there?
I mean, I am already working on season 2.
Oh, okay.
My time off has ended. Music already exists. And I definitely am finding that, unsurprisingly, that I need a lot of new thematic material. I mean, I wrote 17 themes out of the gate for season 1, more or less. And under any normal circumstance, that would be more than enough. But there's a lot that remains. And truly, like, I don't quite yet know exactly what I'm going to do, because I want to say all, but it cannot be a true statement of my tricks to differentiate all the themes that I had, in season 1. So that's going to be the big challenge. I mean, you brought it up earlier about, are you intimidated or blah, 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 whatever. In season 1, in many ways, I was just in this naive little bubble. Like, oh, I get to do this. I am intimidated in season 2 by myself. That it's like, oh, I have to come up with some new themes and like some new colors, and like, what is even left? What instrument did I not use, in season 1? Because I already had like 6 discrete musical languages in which I wrote all these themes. But it's going to be really fun. And you are correct in your assertion about Numenor that even though it was totally new, it did have a little of that Gondor vibe, in particular the brass, which just was like very simple and fanfare-ic. Was like a fanfare of sort of almost like a Arthurian legend, but it had all these other colors in it. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff coming, and there's a lot of things coming that I will be the first composer to tackle, and that's it's gonna be fun.
Yeah. Well, I did have one last question from the audience. I had numerous people ask me this, actually, when I solicited questions for you. They're wanting to know if we will find out the lyrics to the tracks that feature singing in Middle Earth languages.
Absolutely. It's going to come eventually. It'll all be out. I am going to release early next year a detailed blog entry for every episode. So I have already written like, I don't know, those 4 blog entries, but those were about my experience and my process on the show. They're not actually, if you go back and read them, they're not actually about the show. Yeah, exactly. That was when we're recording. On my blog next year, I have a detailed walkthrough every episode, and that includes, for significant moments where you can really hear the choir, I am saying what the text is in the Tolkien language and in
great,
and in English. And then there will be even further, layers where it's like, if you literally just want the translation of every track on the record or whatever, that is forthcoming. But I would say that, like, I look at my mentions on social media, and as long as people are inquisitive and curious and cool, I don't block them. And so questions, I love questions, and there've already been questions that in the last few weeks, because I've already drafted most of my blogs while it was fresh in my mind. Yeah. People have asked me, well, in episode 3, blah blah blah, and I thought, oh, I didn't answer that in my blog. I didn't realize anybody cared. Let me go back in there. So like, keep them coming. If there's specific things, lyrics being one of them, but those are definitely going to be released. But if there's other questions that are that you're curious about, or specific scenes, because in my mind I have the scenes I want to talk about, and I go to incredible detail, but not quite every single cue in the show, because it's just like, it just becomes overwhelming to read.
Yeah.
But if there's something that fans want to know that I don't clock as being, you know what I mean? Like, your experience is a little different than mine. So
yeah,
hit me up. I'm around. I'm on social media, let me know.
Okay. Well, I know we're running short on time here, Bear. So I want to say thank you so much for joining us, and also congratulations. I see you've got one nomination already. I'm sure there is many more in store for this phenomenal soundtrack. I know I speak for a lot of fans that say from the moment that soundtrack dropped early, we were diving in and absolutely loving what we were hearing. So
thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I love that everybody's been listening and talking about it and experiencing it. And I see people, analyzing it and playing it. And that's all more than I could have ever hoped for. I mean, truly, like, in my head, I was like, I just want to create something that I'm proud of, that I can look you in the eye and say, yeah, that's what I wanted to do, and I'm proud of it.
Yeah.
But the idea that I created something that many people love it's overwhelming. I mean, it really fills me with joy that the score is resonating with people. And yeah, I mean, I'm very excited for where it goes next.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for joining us. Thank you everyone for watching. We'll definitely be on the lookout for season 2, and those blogs. We'll definitely be watching out for those come next year. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.